Rome in the 1600s was the beating heart of Catholic Europe. Nearly 120,000 souls lived within its ancient walls, and thousands more arrived each year as pilgrims, merchants, and artists. This was Baroque Rome, a city being transformed by ambitious popes into a stage for Counter-Reformation power and beauty. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We can step into the crowded squares, walk along the Tiber's edge, and witness the grandeur and struggle of everyday Roman life 3 centuries ago. First, I want to talk about St. Peter's Square. This view shows St. Peter's Basilica rising above the city. By 1626, the new basilica was finally complete after 120 years of construction. The massive dome designed by Michelangelo dominated the skyline. In the foreground, pilgrims stream across an open piazza, not yet enclosed by Bernini's colonnades. Those wouldn't arrive until the 1660s. You can see wooden scaffolding still clinging to parts of the facade. The sound of hammers and chisels echoes constantly. Crowds press forward toward the church entrance. Beggars line the approach, calling out in dozens of languages. Priests in black cassocks move through the throng. The smell of incense drifts from the basilica's open doors, mixing with sweat and dust. Guards watch for pickpockets who work the pilgrim crowds. This was the most important construction project in Christendom. Popes poured fortunes into it. The church's completion announced Rome's triumph over Protestant Reformation. It drew visitors from across Europe, fueling the city's economy through donations and the sale of holy relics. The square we see today, with its sweeping colonnades embracing visitors, came later. But the basilica itself remains unchanged, still drawing millions each year to stand where these 17th century pilgrims once stood in awe. This is Piazza Navona on Market Day. The long oval piazza follows the outline of an ancient Roman stadium. By the 1650s, Pope Innocent X was transforming it into a showcase for his family's power. In the center, Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers was under construction. Workers guide massive blocks of marble into place. Water hasn't yet begun to flow. Market stalls line both sides of the square. Vendors sell vegetables, fabric, live chickens, and bread. Shoppers argue over prices. Children chase each other between the stalls. The Pamphili family palace dominates one side, its windows overlooking everything. Carriages clatter across the cobblestones. The air smells of roasted meat and horse manure. Tension simmers here. The fountain's construction stirred bitter rivalry between Bernini and Borromini, two titans of Baroque architecture. Crowds sometimes grew unruly during festivals. Papal guards maintained order, but theft and violence erupted regularly in the press of bodies. This piazza represented papal authority made visible. It was a stage for processions, celebrations, and displays of wealth. The Pamphili Pope wanted everyone to see his family's glory reflected in stone and water. Today, the fountain still flows. The market stalls are gone, replaced by outdoor cafes and artists selling paintings. But the space remains a gathering place, just as it was in the 1600s. This is the Tiber River and Ponte Sant'Angelo. The ancient bridge leads toward Castel Sant'Angelo, the circular fortress rising in the background. By the 1660s, Bernini was adding his famous angel sculptures to the bridge's balustrades. 10 marble angels, each holding an instrument of Christ's Passion, line the walkway. Workers carve the final details under canvas tents. The river flows brown and swollen below. Fishermen cast nets from small boats. Washerwomen scrub laundry at the water's edge, slapping wet fabric against stones. The current moves quickly after recent rains. Carts and pedestrians crowd the bridge, creating bottlenecks. Arguments break out when wagons can't pass. Flooding posed constant danger. The Tiber rose without warning, drowning ground floor rooms and ruining stored grain. Disease followed the floods. Mosquitoes bred in standing water, spreading fevers through the summer months. The river also carried waste and filth from upstream, making the water undrinkable near the city. The bridge was a vital artery. It connected the main city to the Vatican district and controlled access to St. Peter's. Pilgrims crossed here by thousands during Jubilee years. Tolls collected at the bridge filled papal coffers. Remarkably, you can still walk this bridge today. Bernini's angels remain, though the originals are now protected indoors and copies stand in their place. The view across to the castle is nearly unchanged. This is Campo de Fiori in the early morning. The square fills with market vendors setting up their stalls. Farmers arrive with carts loaded with produce from the countryside. Fresh vegetables, herbs, flowers, and fruit cover wooden tables. The smell of earth and green things fills the air. Merchants shout to attract buyers. Servants from wealthy households inspect the goods carefully, haggling over every scudo. In the center stands a darker reminder. This is where Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600 for heresy. The execution ground became a market square, but the memory lingered. The Inquisition's shadow fell across Rome throughout the century. Fear of accusation kept people cautious in their speech and associations. The square sat at the heart of a densely packed neighborhood. Narrow streets radiated outward, lined with workshops and modest homes. Artisans lived above their shops. The sound of hammering, sawing, and voices drifted from every direction. At night, the square emptied quickly. Few street lamps existed, and darkness brought thieves. This was working Rome, distinct from the grand piazzas and palaces. It showed daily survival, small commerce, and the weight of religious authority over ordinary lives. The market fed the city, but the execution ground warned against stepping out of line. Today, the flower market continues each morning. A statue of Bruno now marks the spot where he died. The square remains a living piece of old Rome, still surrounded by medieval buildings and narrow lanes.
This view shows the Jewish Ghetto along the Tiber River. By 1555, Pope Paul IV had forced Rome's Jewish population into a walled enclosure near the river. The ghetto gates locked at sunset and reopened at dawn. Inside, 5,000 people crowded into a space meant for half that number. Buildings rose to 7 or 8 stories, blocking out sunlight. Laundry hung between the upper floors like tethered flags. The streets are barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Shops selling used clothing and scrap metal occupy the ground floors. The smell is overwhelming in summer. Too many people, inadequate drainage, and the river's odor mixing together. Children play in the narrow alleys. Hebrew prayers drift from the 5 synagogues squeezed into the enclosure. Flooding hit the ghetto worst of all. Its low position by the river meant water rose quickly, filling ground floors and destroying possessions. Disease followed every flood. Yet residents couldn't leave. Papal law required them to live here, wear identifying badges, and observe a curfew. The ghetto served multiple purposes for Papal Rome. It segregated the Jewish population while keeping them available for the money lending the Church officially forbade Christians. It was a visible assertion of Christian dominance, and it provided a convenient scapegoat when tensions rose in the city. The ghetto walls came down in 1888 after Italian unification. Much of it was demolished, but a small section survives, and the synagogue still operates. Plaques now commemorate the community that endured here for over 3 centuries. This is Palazzo Barberini under construction. By the 1630s, Pope Urban VIII Barberini was building his family's palace on the Quirinal Hill. The The massive structure spreads across the hillside. Scaffolding covers the facade. Hundreds of workers swarm over it: stonemasons, bricklayers, plasterers, and painters. The sound of construction fills the neighborhood from dawn to dusk. Inside, artists create elaborate ceiling frescoes. Pietro da Cortona is painting his masterpiece, The Triumph of Divine Providence, a swirling celebration of the Barberini family's rise to power. You can smell fresh plaster and paint. Gold leaf gleams in the lamplight. The cost is staggering, draining the papal treasury. Resentment builds among Romans. The Pope's nepotism enriched his family while the city's infrastructure crumbled. Satirical poems appeared on speaking statues at night, mocking the Barberini bees that decorated everything the family built. "What the barbarians didn't do, the Barberini did," went one famous quip. Yet the palace represented Baroque ambition at its peak. It showcased the era's greatest artists and architects working together. It announced that papal families could build monuments rivaling ancient emperors, and it provided employment for hundreds of craftsmen, keeping Rome's artistic economy alive. The palace stands complete today, now housing the National Gallery of Ancient Art. You can still see Cortona's ceiling, one of Baroque Rome's greatest masterpieces, soaring above you, just as it did for Urban VIII. This view shows Via del Corso cutting through the city center. The long, straight street runs from Piazza del Popolo to Piazza Venezia, following an ancient Roman road. By the 1650s, it was Rome's main thoroughfare. Palaces of noble families line both sides, their facades competing for grandeur. Ground-floor shops served the street traffic, awnings stretched across the fronts, providing shade. Carriages, riders, pedestrians, and carts shared the narrow space. Wheels clattered on stone pavement. Drivers shouted at each other when traffic jams developed. Street vendors work the crowds, selling everything from holy medals to roasted chestnuts. Servants ran errands. Priests moved between churches. Beggars positioned themselves near palace entrances, hoping for charity. Accidents happened regularly. Horses spooked, carriages collided, and pedestrians were struck. No traffic rules existed beyond the strong pushing aside the weak. Pickpockets worked the crowded street constantly. At night, the street belonged to different kinds of danger: robbers, gangs, and occasional violence between rival families. This street was Rome's social artery. Seeing and being seen mattered. Fashion, carriages, and servants displayed status. Gossip spread here. News arrived here. It connected the city's north and south, making it essential for both commerce and social life. You can walk this same street today, though it's now a pedestrian shopping zone for most of its length. The palaces remain, though many of them are now shops, apartments, or offices. The street still pulses with Roman life. This is the Quirinal Palace overlooking the city. The summer residence of the popes sits on Rome's highest hill, catching breezes that made it more bearable than the Vatican in July and August. By the 1630s, expansions were underway. The palace spread across the hillside, its gardens stretching behind high walls. Guards in papal livery stand at the gates. Inside, the papal court conducted its business. Cardinals came and went in their scarlet robes. Ambassadors from Catholic kingdoms sought audiences. Petitioners waited in antechambers, sometimes for days, hoping to present their cases. The sound of hushed conversations and footsteps on marble echoed through the corridors. Intrigue filled every corner. Factions competed for the Pope's favor. Appointments, pardons, and privileges were bought and sold. When a pope died, chaos erupted as cardinals maneuvered for election. The palace became a fortress, locked down while the conclave met to choose a successor. This palace represented the temporal power of the papacy. Popes ruled Rome and the papal states as monarchs, not just spiritual leaders. Wars, taxes, justice, and diplomacy all radiated from here. The The wealth and power concentrated in this building shaped life across central Italy. After Italian unification in 1870, it became the official residence of Italy's kings and now serves as the presidential palace. The building still overlooks Rome from its commanding height, though its role has changed completely. This view shows the ruins of the Roman Forum among Baroque Rome. Ancient columns rise from fields used for grazing cattle. The Forum Romanum, once the heart of classical civilization, had become the Campo Vaccino, the cow field. By the 1600s, the ruins were half buried in earth and debris. Medieval and Renaissance buildings crowded around the edges. Farmers drove herds between the ancient temples. Artists came here to sketch. The ruins provided popular subjects for paintings and engravings sold to travelers. Local guides, often making up stories, led visitors through the scattered stones. Children played among the columns. The smell of livestock mixed with wild herbs growing in the cracks. Yet treasure hunters also worked these ruins. Marble was pulled from ancient buildings to be burned for lime or used in new construction. Pope Urban VIII famously stripped bronze from the Pantheon's portico to make cannons for Sant'Angelo. The ancient past was quarried to build Baroque Rome. The ruins represented different things to different people. For scholars, they were evidence of Rome's former glory. For peasants, they were convenient building materials. For papal authorities, they were reminders that empires fall, even Rome's, but the Church endures. Archaeological excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries cleared away the dirt and revealed the Forum we know today. You can now walk on the ancient stones, but you'll see them pristine and isolated, not embedded in the living city as they were in the 1600s. This is the Pantheon still serving as a church. The ancient temple converted to Christian use in 609 as Santa Maria ed Martyrims remained one of Rome's architectural marvels. Its dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built, soared above the Piazza. The oculus at the dome's center let in a shaft of sunlight and rain. On wet days, water pooled on the marble floor. Crowds gathered in the Piazza outside. The space was smaller then, more cramped with buildings pressing close to the ancient walls. Markets operated nearby. The smell of food and incense mixed. Pilgrims came to venerate the relics of Christian martyrs buried underneath the floor. Artists studied the dome's perfect proportions. The building had survived because of its conversion to church use. Other ancient temples were demolished or left to decay, but this one's religious function protected it. Still, alterations continued. Bell towers, called the Ass's Ears, were added to the roof in the 1620s, much to the dismay of those who appreciated classical purity. The Pantheon connected ancient and Baroque Rome in a single structure. It proved that ancient Rome's achievements could serve Christian purposes. It inspired Baroque architects who studied how the ancients created such perfect spaces. And it drew visitors who marveled that something so old could still stand so complete. The building remains remarkably unchanged today. The bell towers were removed in the 19th century, but otherwise you see what 1600s Romans saw and what 2nd century Romans saw before them. It remains one of the best preserved ancient buildings in Rome. This view shows Rome during a Jubilee Year. Every 25 years, the Pope declared a holy year, and pilgrims flooded into Rome by the tens of thousands. The 1625 Jubilee under Urban VIII drew visitors from across Europe. The roads leading to the city filled with travelers on foot, on horseback, and in carts. Dust clouds rose from their passage. The sick and disabled came seeking healing. The faithful came seeking indulgences. The city strained under the influx. Every inn filled beyond capacity. Pilgrims slept in churches, in monastery courtyards, and even in the streets. Charitable organizations set up soup kitchens. The smell of too many unwashed bodies in close quarters became overwhelming.
Disease spread quickly. Fevers, dysentery, and plague all found opportunity in the crowded conditions. Yet, the church prepared elaborate ceremonies. Processions wound through the streets carrying relics and icons. Cardinals in full regalia led thousands in prayer. The four major basilicas, St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, Santa Maria Maggiore, and St. Paul's, became pilgrimage destinations. Visitors needed to walk between all four to receive full indulgences. Jubilee years were economic windfalls. Merchants sold everything from holy metals to food to lodging at inflated prices. Pickpockets and con artists worked the crowds. But the city also demonstrated its importance as the center of Catholic faith. Pilgrims returned home with stories that kept Rome alive in Europe's religious imagination. No single view quite captures Jubilee Rome, but these enormous gatherings happened throughout the 1600s, temporarily transforming the city into something even more crowded, even more fervent, and even more chaotic than usual. Standing here, looking at these scenes brought back to life, the distance between us and 1600s Rome feels suddenly smaller. The same light falls on the same stones. The Tiber still flows past the same banks, and people still gather in these same squares, separated from those 16th century crowds by time, but not by place. If there's another city, another moment, or another scene you'd like to see reconstructed and explored, let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you so much.